Hi, everybody.
Hi, Myra.
Hello.
Oh, I need to start video. Okay.
You're all going, except we just see you from the nose up.
Oh, sorry. Is this recording now?
Yes, it is.
Christ is risen from the dead. By death he is trampling down upon death, and to those in the tombs he is bestowing life. Lord Jesus Christ, our God, bless this meeting and the gathering that is around this grouping, and that our discussions may be fruitful and the information may be a blessing upon your holy church. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And Father, I apologize. That is my dog that you hear with doors closed, I might add. Okay. Texting my wife, asking him to take him upstairs. All right, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see so many here tonight. And as Myra just explained, several of our clergy are probably at a syndesmos retreat, I imagine, today or the next couple of days. Tonight, we're really blessed to welcome Meredith McNabb of the Lake Institute. I think in the invitation, you've gotten an idea of Meredith's extensive background and work, not only for the Lake Institute and the Lilly School of Philanthropy at IUPUI, but also as an ordained clergywoman in the Virginia Conference of the United Methodist Church. Again, I'm not going to repeat everything that you've seen in the invitation, but what I do want to stress is that Meredith is part of a tremendous resource to not only to us tonight, but to the Archdiocese as a whole, from the Lake Institute. For several years now, people from our Archdiocese have been participating in Father Jim and I participated in the Executive Certificate in Religious Fundraising, and there have been classes that have been held on campus at Holy Cross Hellenic College with many dozens of attendees over the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years, who are learning about stewardship and fundraising in the light of the religious setting that we find ourselves in. So the relationship between our parishes and the Lake Institute is deep, and it goes back many years. And for the folks on the call who know the guys from the Telos program or Ann Bezarides, they too have benefited from the relationship with the Lake Institute. And so we're really fortunate and blessed to have Meredith here tonight. She's going to be talking about engaging people in the life of the parish and cultivating generosity and helping to change our mindsets from, I think, what's too often a condition of scarcity, when we think if we could just get, or if we can just raise, or if we can just meet a budget. And I think that's a mindset that needs a lot of work in our parishes. So Meredith, thank you for your time tonight, for willing to be part of this, and welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Stacy. I really appreciate it. I am really delighted to be with you all and bring greetings from the Lake Institute. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. We'll have a bit of presentation and then time for questions and conversation, and some interactive pieces along the way. But let me just fill in what Stacy already said. I am part of Lake Institute on Faith and Giving, and we're part of Indiana University's Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. Kind of like the business school and the law school and the School of Dentistry, IU has a School of Philanthropy, studying giving from historical perspectives and economic perspectives and nonprofit management perspectives, and from faith perspectives. And Lake Institute is really glad to carry that that responsibility within a public research university, engaging across religious traditions, but to really look at the fact that faith is what motivates so many people to give, both to houses of worship, to their parish, to their archdiocese, but also to all the other places where they give their money. Faith is such a motivating force. We're delighted to be able to be a part of that. Lake Institute works in three main areas: research and scholarship. I'm going to be sharing some of the research that we've done in-house, as well as research that we curate across the field. Education and training, as Stacey mentioned, and then public conversation, because you know what? We don't always speak very well in public about God or money. And there is something to be said for helping people to do that as well as we can within our own traditions, understanding what it is that is at the intersection of faith and giving. As Stacey mentioned, we do teach the Executive Certificate in Religious Fundraising, which is for clergy leaders and lay leaders within parishes and within judicatory structures of different houses of worship, as well as a congregational course. And so tonight, I'm going to be sharing a taste of a few of the pieces that we cover in those courses, trying to cover some of the landscape of giving and giving trends, and then to look at one kind of overarching approach to building generosity within parishes. I want to start by sharing a little about the changing landscape of religious giving all across all sectors of philanthropy. The latest data that's available from Giving USA, which is a study that our school conducts each year and has done for the last 40 some years, looking at all of the charitable giving across the United States, and pointing to the fact that $471 billion in 2020 were donated to charitable causes. That's the largest number that's ever been donated, even taking into account inflation. And you see the breakdown across different sectors of the giving world, where religion is the largest share at $131 billion given to parishes, to judicatories, the archdiocese, for instance, and religious publishing. So it's quite narrow. Religiously founded hospitals or social service type providers like food pantries and that sort of thing are not included in that religion slice of the pie. There is a great deal of money that is donated, and I think that even that is something that helps to counter the scarcity mindset from the jump here. I will point out that certainly 2020 is a bit of a gap right now. They are at this very moment putting some of the finishing touches on the 2021 study. It'll come out in just a few weeks in June. There is a data lag, and you will see that through much of what I present. In order to have good sociology data, it takes the scientists a bit of time to work with it. But I'm delighted to point to this largest charitable giving on record. I do want to point out, though, that while religion is still the largest share and has been for many, many years since we've been studying it, you'll see in this chart that back in the early 80s, religion accounted for almost 60% of all the charitable giving that was made. And now we're down under 30%. This is not necessarily a story of abundance. And yet, as I'm going to be describing a lot of things that are shifting in the landscape, we often like to observe that it is not that the sky is falling, it is that the ground is shifting. For instance, the proliferation of nonprofit organizations has just skyrocketed in those last same 40 years. And that trend is unlikely to cease. In one of the recent studies about Gen Z individuals, the youngest adults, something like 20% of them expect to start a nonprofit in their lifetime. We all know about the idealism of the young, and yet that is, I think, sort of an astounding number of people who simply expect to do good in the world by formal means of starting organizations. That is, I think, not a bad thing. And that kind of generosity is something that the church has a hand in forming, and certainly can help people to recognize how those energies can be directed through and into parish life. Along with the largest amount of giving, though, let me point out that we have come to a time of the smallest percentage of people making those gifts. More dollars from fewer donors is a trend that many congregations, parishes have seen. You see here, again, with the latest data that's available from 2018, it's a study that, again, gets updated only periodically. The philanthropy panel study, also in the School of Philanthropy, found that for the first time, fewer than half of American households give to an organized charitable institution. Many Americans still give quite generously to individuals or to even to strangers who they don't know. But thinking about organized charitable giving, like we would be assuming within our parish stewardship efforts, under half of American households. I think that this is absolutely directly correlated with a trend in religious disaffiliation. Gallup found last year that indeed church membership had also dropped below 50% for the first time. This is something that certainly gives pause to many of us trying to think about disaffiliation trends and understand what it is that is both helping people to connect with their faith through church membership, and what it is that is fostering such decline. This is not a new trend. Let me say, this is not something to blame on millennials. The trend actually begins back in the 50s and 60s. Simply didn't notice it for a little while there because of converts, really, and various other trends across the population. But disaffiliation is rising. Close to 40% of those Gen Z youngest adults don't identify as any religious tradition. They are not members of any house of worship. And in fact, when you survey them and ask them what their faith tradition is, they don't say Orthodox, they don't say Catholic, they don't say Methodist, but they don't say atheist or agnostic either. They say nothing in particular, which has become the fastest growing religious group in the United States. This again can be a story of scarcity. I would like to propose, though, that there is also a narrative of opportunity. Those are a lot of people who are not spiritually disengaged. They are religiously disengaged. And there is an opportunity there for us to consider how it is that their affiliation might be encouraged, might be invited. That is another kind of generosity than I think we're often thinking about when we think of stewardship. And we're thinking about the dollars and cents, but inviting people to give of their time, to give of their hearts, to give of their identity is another kind of generosity that I think plays into this disaffiliation trend. Worship participation and giving are also directly correlated. Wanted to share out of the 2020 FACT study, Faith Communities Today, from some of the leading researchers on congregational life. thinking about what worship size, worship participation is looking like. You'll notice in this chart all across Christian tradition, there is a shrink in worship participation. Large congregations, small congregations. You do note other religious traditions note some significant increase in studying what those trends look like. Part of it is invitation. There is also a steady influence of immigration positively on other traditions' participation. There are also fewer houses of worship in Judaism, in Hinduism, in Islam, and so they do tend to be a bit larger as well. But I wanted to particularly share around the study that FACT did on spiritual vitality. Again, this piece of the ground is shifting, but the sky is not necessarily falling. I am quite encouraged myself about the uptick in spiritual health of the parishes that may be shrinking in numeric size, but appear to be growing at least somewhat in the actual faith identity and practice. I think that there's something really intriguing here. We sometimes talk about disaffiliation as just a complicated story, because people's sense of identity with a faith tradition is sometimes tenuous. This same study, we're going to talk in just a moment about what they observed about Orthodox tradition, but of recognizing the spiritual zeal of folks who are in fact deeply committed to their tradition, to their faith, versus folks who are quite loosely and perhaps only by family distant connection, particularly affiliated. And I lift this up of wanting to also note the direct correlation between spiritual vitality and financial generosity. Certainly people of all degrees of financial capacity have all degrees of spiritual vitality, but giving goes up when spiritual vitality goes up, where people feel more connected, deeply invested in what their parish is about, what their church is about. FACT looks at how they identify the spiritual vitality, and I notice the sense of really the categories here were most interesting to me. Although you'll note what they were sharing was that spiritual vitality is all over the map and relatively consistent across different sizes of parishes. But the sense of spiritual vitality, thought-provoking worship and membership and engagement, people who are actively living out their faith, and church conflict, which certainly is something that we will hope to see less and less of in the most spiritually vital congregations. In this same study, they, oh, pardon me, let me, yes, I'll duck back to pandemic there in a moment. In that same study, in fact, they were looking at what factors go into spiritual vitality and therefore contribute to financial generosity, looking at members gathering together for divine common purpose. In that gathering, doing that in ways that transform those people who participate, transform their lives, and that out of that transformation, the local community where that parish is positively affected. The authors, in fact, who were reflecting from an Orthodox perspective, noted that there is some real strength in this story for Orthodox congregations. parishes that have a high quality liturgical life, where members are participating regularly. They note the vitality that converts sometimes bring within the community. They note fasting, confession, participation in Holy Communion are deeply transformative of those who participate. They do note that transformation of local communities is oftentimes not especially high on the priority list for Orthodox parishes, and yet invite some reflection as to what that does in fact look like. I simply want to highlight this spiritual vitality issue to point to some of these trends among donors of while church membership may be declining, while which directly correlates to people giving less and fewer people giving, there is a real opportunity here to invite people to engage. Let me back up a second to the pandemic reports. Pew Research Center, our friends at Pew, looked at what was happening during pandemic. Certainly in many parts of the country, we are actively still in pandemic, though some parts feel quite certain that they have moved past it. But I simply wanted to share this to point to the idea that donors gave more, donors gave less, donors gave about the same. And a lot of that has to do with the uneven impact of the pandemic across communities, recognizing that certainly some communities were quite hard hit, some were not. On the stewardship angle, I note that a number of parishes experienced an increase in giving. For the first time in a long time, they got real clear about asking people to give and about helping them know what that giving supported, why it was a good thing to support their parish and the ministries that happened there. Some of those places hadn't really had those conversations before, and the clarity was really helpful for people who looked around their neighborhoods and the world and wanted to do good. And they knew that that could happen through their parish, both spiritual good and on the ground, tangible good of feeding their neighbors and helping their local communities. I also wanted to highlight this yellow line that I highlighted in Pew's study of the number of folks who do not donate. We have a great number of people across traditions who simply don't give to their parishes. These are people who identify with a parish, with a religious tradition, and yet don't give. And I think that, again, there is an opportunity there. There are many different reasons as to why that might be the case. Certainly some are genuinely living at financial margin, but a lot of them aren't. And there is a story there, perhaps a story of past hurt, perhaps a story of people just not knowing what it is that their gift might mean spiritually or within the life of the parish. And to that end, I want to share a little out of Lake's observation about some donor motivations. We notice sort of two ends of a constellation. Rarely is a donor going to fall directly into one of these categories only. And yet, in our 20-some years of study and observation, these two paradigms seem to be present as some foci in the field. First, the traditional paradigm. These are institutionally minded givers. These are folks who are formed in the faith tradition of giving. They understand and feel the duty to give, and that is in fact fulfilling within their own spiritual lives, within their own spiritual disciplines. They tend to trust institutions like parishes. For a traditional paradigm giver, making the gift is the point of the gift. To have been a giver, to support this parish that we value, what it is, who makes it up, the ministry that happens here. That is the point. And giving to the budget, the budget reflects the needs of the parish, and folks, again, trust the institution to spend that money appropriately. I in no way want to suggest that this is some outdated, old-fashioned way of giving. This can be deeply holy and deeply meaningful for individuals, and creates the backbone for the giving within a lot of parishes. However, there is also an emerging paradigm of givers. These are folks for whom the sense of I ought to give to my parish is simply not ingrained. And this may be due to formation, this may be due to experiences of, I'm sorry to say, financial misconduct within houses of worship. Something hasn't clicked for them about why they should be giving, but they do have a sense that they have received from God, and they want to pass that on. They want to extend that blessing. They want to be a part of the grace and love that they have experienced. Again, I do not mean to say that people giving out of a traditional sense do not experience grace. They certainly do. But folks within this emerging paradigm on their giving front are not necessarily inclined to give to the parish institution, to any institution. They want to know what is going to happen because of this gift. Because making the gift itself is not the point. What that gift does is the point. That is how they are living out their faith commitment. And the giving doesn't happen because you need it as a parish. Happens because there is alignment of values. Let me say, I have worked with a number of parishes, a number of priests who have had a pretty strong reaction to say, well, we need to get people to be traditional paradigm givers. How do we teach them the value of giving? That is certainly a piece of moral formation, a piece of spiritual discipline. And yet, let me simply suggest that we have both traditional paradigm givers and emerging paradigm givers within any community. And if our invitations to people to give only focus on traditional paradigm givers, we are missing connecting with some of our emerging paradigm givers. I suspect that some of those non-givers in that chart from Pew are emerging paradigm givers who have not been invited, have not seen how giving to their parish has a positive impact. And so I simply offer that as a way to think about some of these changing trends in giving. My last piece of data, for those of you who are data nerds, I hope that you've been thriving. I will share these slides with you, and you can dig into them as you like. For those of you who are not data inclined, you're almost through. I simply wanted to highlight some of the shifts across generations of givers. We note that these are just really important trends. In some ways, younger people are often more emerging paradigm minded, and older people can be more traditional paradigm minded, but that's far less to do with generation and far more to do with that disaffiliation trend of how many folks have been formed in parish life and identity, and how many have not or have been very weakly formed. But I wanted to share this study from Barna looking at Christians across traditions, but across age groups, at how they primarily live out their generosity. You can see that some of it is certainly age and stage related, that the elders, folks in silent generation and older, sort of mid-70s and up, primarily give through monetary support. That is their largest identity of generosity. Whereas Gen Z adults from their mid-20s and younger their primary expression of generosity is through volunteering and service. They have less money to give. And in many ways, time is what a lot of them do have. But noting that money, volunteering, emotional generosity, relational support, gifts, bringing casseroles to those who are sick, and welcoming people into their homes are ways that that people identify being generous primarily. Again, I think that parishes sometimes focus only on monetary generosity or monetary and volunteering to the detriment of honoring other types of generosity, or acknowledging that our expressions of generosity may very well change across our lifetime. And the person who is volunteering today may be able and willing and interested to write checks, or not checks, electronic gifts in future years. Let me pause here for just a moment and hear from you. Are there ways that you see your own parishes in these statistics? Are there ways that you see points of difference?
If anybody wants to go ahead and raise your hand or put a question in the chat, we can certainly do that, and I'll try to make sure we're calling on everybody. And while people are doing that, Meredith, I'm going to take advantage of my status as mouthpiece here. So I work with GOA parishes in lots of different places, and I happen to be working with one now that what you started out talking about, sort of the landscape or the ground shifting under their feet. Mm-hmm. You know, they came to that realization 8 or 10 years ago and realized they desperately needed to do something to it, to change that or to respond to it. How can we get our parishes to understand that the shift is so subtle, but that it's happening? You know, I think a lot of people who get into parish leadership roles get in and become, you know, preoccupied with sort of maintaining status quo, and that's the ground shift. Yeah. So I don't know if you have any advice or words of wisdom on how to sort of be aware of the subtlety of the ground shifting under your feet, because it happens over time too. It's 20, 25, 30 years. And people wake up and go, oh my gosh, where is everybody? So I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. And certainly I do not have 6 easy steps for your parish to raise more money. So if that was what you came for, I apologize. But this is an adaptive question, and the people in the parish are the ones who are going to be able to answer that question best. But I would say that the overarching thing that I find is for people to actually know giving patterns. That does not necessarily mean, and shouldn't really mean, wide distribution of giving records, but knowing what giving patterns look like. What's the average gift here? How many member households do we have who don't give or don't make an identifiable gift? Those kinds of patterns, and looking at them over time. If you can, if your data is good enough that you can go back and pull 5 years ago's numbers as well. I think sometimes that is one of the most fruitful ways, especially if you have folks who are really resistant to saying, well, you know, we're hanging in. What do you mean? Nothing's really changed around here. Father Jim, please chime in.
I never want to interrupt you, Meredith.
No, please.
Better. I've always taken on challenging parishes in addition to my work at the Archdiocese, because I feel like it helps me to learn. And I'm in a parish now where the decline has been so incremental that they don't even realize it. And having come in 3 years ago with fresh eyes, I tell them that this church is dying, and they get resentful. But I say, you don't see the decline. It's like the story about the frog in the pot that doesn't realize that he's boiling to death. because it's so incremental, but it takes fresh eyes. And I think sometimes bringing in an outsider, whether it's a new clergy person or a consultant, to look at the church and tell you, or there are so many analysts now who can help you analyze your parish. I think it's really important that we get those fresh eyes sometimes because we can't see ourselves clearly. But
Yeah.
I love listening to you talk. So,
and being able to think, I mean, 2000, when giving, close to 70% of households across the nation were giving to charitable institutions. 2000 feels like it was not that long ago until you think about it, and it was a generation ago. Suddenly being able to think about what your increments look like. Father Jim, I appreciate that so much. If you're in it, you get used to it. But being able to widen that time horizon is sometimes a useful piece of just acknowledging, oh, where there once were 500 people, there is 100 people. We didn't notice it one person at a time. Yes, Demetrius.
Yeah, hi. I really appreciate your presentation and so far. And it's interesting. I find myself between those paradigms that you mentioned. On one hand, I feel my faith. Okay, I give my donation, I give my gift, and then God will take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
But my rational mind, on the other hand, goes more of the latest paradigm and says, okay, I want to see the value.
Huh.
So I can see myself between those both paradigms, the traditional and the new one. The traditional based on my faith, in other words, I did my part, God, okay? I'm not going to question it. I take it that the church has the knowledge and, they will do it what they seem it's the best way to spend it. But on the other hand, too, I do want to see the value of what good do I bring to the world? What good do I bring to my community? And does my gift, influence outside of myself? So it's kind of interesting, I can see both, and I can see maybe, myself, I'm kind of go both ways.
Yeah, I think that you have just described the experience of many individual faithful participants. I think that part of the challenge is that parishes can tend to assume that everyone is in the traditional paradigm. And can tend to neglect the fact that people may have an interest in both and operate from both, and or there may be folks who really are simply not formed yet, or perhaps simply in their makeup, maybe ever. And there are ways that we can invite them. There is good being done through the parish. Sometimes you have to just tell the story a little bit. And actually that is, if I can seize on that moment as a moment of transition to our last movement here for the evening, I wanted to share a way that Lake has used to invite parishes to think about stewardship beyond a narrow stewardship season, beyond an annual appeal, beyond festival time, beyond end of year, and really begin to think about what year-round stewardship can look like. That does not mean that there is a campaign 52 weeks a year. That is not what I mean by a year-round cycle of giving. We want to highlight the fact that these four quadrants that you see here on the screen are all a part of that year-round cycle. And quite often we neglect one or more of these quadrants and only wind up in ask, and that is to our detriment. Thinking about telling the story, Demetrius, I think as you were just intimating, the sense of you want to know what's happening here. Being able to be quite clear about what the parish is about, recognizing that there is a sacred identity to this body of Christ, and also it is also an organization that has an identity that is worth identifying clearly for folks. A case statement, a case for support is sort of a formal fundraising way of putting that together. You may have seen it mostly in parish contexts around capital campaigns. When we pull together the facts, the figures, the stories, the why behind why one might give to this project or to this place. But that's a way of telling the story about what you're about. Celebrating that story. I would also say celebrating the story and helping it be just crystal clear how the ministry of this parish is deeply tied to the sacred story. The ways that living out the apostolic tradition, the ways that the preaching and the teaching help to tell the story of what it means for this parish to exist, for people to be a part of it, to encounter God here. Asking is certainly an important quadrant. And I say some parishes get stuck in only asking for, say, weekly gifts in offering time and maybe end of the year or capital campaigns. But by ask, I also mean really helping people to find the avenues through which they can give. There are people who are delighted to support the ongoing ministry of the parish. That annual stewardship appeal appeals to them. Time and talent. Are you capturing those Gen Z individuals that you might have, or the people for whom finances may be a genuinely tight thing, but who dearly want to be able to be generous? Planned giving. Is there an active legacy gift program to invite people to consider supporting the parish through their estate plans? For many middle-income Americans, the most transformative gift that we can make is at the end of our lives, when our assets can be distributed. For a number of faithful folks, it's really meaningful to be able to make that plan and to think about, I can support this place that I love even after I'm gone, and wanting to again, just create those opportunities. Capital programs, some folks are deeply moved by the idea of being able to give to, again, large scale, long-standing projects, whether they make large gifts, whether they make small gifts. Again, for some folks, that is an expression of generosity that's deeply meaningful. Are we making that available to folks? Special giving and year-end giving, again, just opportunities to do that. I want to just put a little pin here about digital giving. And simply express that I believe at last study, 92% of American congregations were offering digital giving. I still am boggled that in the wake of 2 years of pandemic, there are congregations that have not made that move, but I simply want to encourage every parish I am in contact with to make it easy for people to give. I know that sometimes the fees can be something of a barrier, and certainly I want people to find a fee structure that works for them. But my goodness, if you tell me that you'll give me $100 if I give you $2, I will take that deal every day, all day. I think that we can fall over ourselves and create roadblocks for people who want to be generous, but simply do not handle checks or cash in their economic lives by making it possible and easy for them to give digitally. But learning and planning is going to be a way that you're going to know within your parish how to do that best. This sense of evaluation and analysis is something that parishes neglect so often. I know Sunday's coming every week, and taking the time to be able to pause and reflect and analyze can feel daunting, but it is so worthwhile to discover which of the ways that you're asking are people responding to. Are there efforts that the parish is engaging in that are not as fruitful as as one would hope, or are not accomplishing what we want it to do. I say this in knowing that festivals are deeply important in many, many, many communities, not necessarily for the funds that are raised, though that is certainly important, but also for the friends that are raised, for the community presence and engagement, for the camaraderie. Simply knowing what's happening. Is our end of the year giving really strong in our community? Maybe we could do more. Is that simply not an issue? Let's not spend time on it. That kind of analysis is important. And then the planning. You'll see there endowment planning and capital planning. Being able to look ahead, being able to be prepared when someone walks in and says, I'd like to give you $100,000. What would you do with it? It is very, very, very good to have had parish council conversations, to have had vision conversation. What would we do with a windfall gift? How could we honor that kind of generosity and honor our mission and vision and stick with our mission and vision? How do we know what gifts we need to say no to? Some of this is certainly beyond the scope of a 1 hour workshop, but those kinds of planning conversations, again, allow the giving cycle simply to flow freely, and to keep that momentum going, to help there be momentum about stewardship, about generosity, helping people to learn about giving. Something like 43% of congregations of all types across the United States teach about giving once a year or less. Most of us ask for gifts every week. We have a disconnect there about helping people to know what it means to be generous, not just generous to our parish, but to be generous as a faith practice, as a value and a virtue in our lives. Momentum of affirming donors' gifts. I know sometimes we can think, well, but this is what people should be doing. Giving is part of faith, and yeah, get with the program. Give. It is worth affirming people's giving. Saying thank you is rarely a bad thing. We certainly don't want to be showy with people who are private, or otherwise offend folks through it. But a quiet word of thanks, genuinely felt, I think is a piece of that momentum of generosity that is important. And then finally, celebration. So often we get stuck in modes of scarcity and what we don't have. And we miss the assets that God has given. We miss that there are things that are really worth celebrating that are happening in our midst. I would invite you to consider where in these quadrants your parishes are strong. Again, a scarcity mindset sometimes takes over when I introduce this tool and people start thinking, well, we don't really do this very well, and that has kind of fallen apart, and gosh, I don't even know how we would start doing this. Let me invite you not to do a deficit analysis here. Where are there strengths in your parish across these quadrants? And as you reflect on those strengths, where do you see sparks? Where, with just this much effort, or just this tweak, or if we just had a different approach to that piece, there could really be some trajectory movement. I'm always interested in the strengths of a parish, because everyone has them, and the sparks where genuinely God might be moving, and where there is a place where, for lack of a better phrase, some low-hanging fruit could be picked, and where the parish can start to see those positive changes. There is a flywheel effect there that just helps that momentum to continue. so that the story can be told, so that you can ask with integrity and care, so that you can keep on making sure that what's being asked and what's being done are effective to the mission. Again, I leave this with you simply as a way of thinking about how stewardship might happen all across a year. And as a way to even just wrap your arms around what's happening in your parishes, perhaps in a way that you may or may not have thought of before. We have just a few minutes here, but I'd be delighted if you have responses or questions or comments.
Meredith, there's a question in the chat from Owen.
Marvelous.
Talking about sort of reconciling between the two paradigms, the traditional paradigm and the emerging mindset. The question says, what approach should those with the traditional paradigm mindset do you take to show or convince them that those with the emerging paradigm mindset are really a part of the parish? Because it feels to me like, even though we're not entirely saying it, we are talking a little bit about a battle between age groups sometimes.
Well, it certainly could feel that way. I suppose my first response is it might help for them to meet one another. I mean, quite literally, is there a person that you know who gives from more of an emerging paradigm mindset, or even partially, as Demetrius was saying, who these folks can have some conversation about what it is that giving means, and hopefully that can help to just dispel some myths that cultivating a donor means that you're pandering to a donor. That is not what that means. It means that you're inviting that donor and not simply assuming that donor. Honestly, I would say traditional mindset folks could use some invitation and cultivation as well. Some celebration of their faithfulness, some lifting up of what that virtue and practice of generosity has looked like. Beyond that, I would say in some ways it's almost a bigger challenge sometimes to convince emerging paradigm givers that the parish is a place of their giving, not only the things that they see as doing good, that the parish is actually also a part of that. I mean, recognizing that parishes form people in faith, parishes help people encounter the holy. Those are things those are impacts that a great many folks want to support. Sometimes we have to name it, as opposed to support. I will pick on St. George, support St. George's. Well, yes, support St. George's so that young people can be formed in faith and encounter Christ. Those can be some subtle differences. Demetrius, go ahead.
I was going to say again is, I think what we really struggle at this point, most of the parishes at least, is to keep the lights on. Meaning we have budgets and we stay with the numbers, and we struggle to meet the budget on our own. So we expect others to pay for our salaries, to pay for our lights, to pay for our energy that we use, whatever, to maintain the building. And I, at least from my personal experience, I believe that the great majority of our effort and focus stays just so we can keep our lights on. Try to find funds to keep the doors open, basically, at this point. And we have the right priests and the right sanders to enhance the worship. So, and that takes a lot of time and effort. And as a result, people don't see the added value. In other words, we don't go outside of our churches to take care of our communities because we need to make sure that our buildings stay open. So that's a big challenge. So I don't know how we get out of it.
I would also point out that, I mean, good is happening because those buildings are open, because those staff are paid. And sometimes it is a piece of storytelling to simply communicate. We're not just paying the light bill. We are making it so that the people of God can gather for Holy Communion. I mean, this is real. This is good stuff. in ways that sometimes that narrative doesn't come through. And does, people are praying for the world here. That seems transformative. That seems important. How can we help people to hear that value? Yeah, Owen, go ahead.
You are muted. Owen. There you go.
There we go. We are blessed with a priest who does not ask for money ever. And except when he makes his stewardship pitch once a quarter or so, and we're having a memorial, and he asks all of the visitors that if they're not a steward at their parish, to please be a steward at their parish. Our number of stewards and stewardship giving increased pretty significantly during the pandemic. And I have absolutely no proof for what I'm about to say, but I am convinced there were two things that made that happen. Number one, very early in the pandemic, our priest and the Metropolitan were photographed handing out bags of food. And number two, and this was an effort that Myra led, 500 or more phone calls were made to the people in our parish asking if they needed anything. And again, we were blessed with all of those phone calls. One person said they needed something. Everyone else was being taken care of by family or friends. But because the phone call was made, people wanted to give more than they had been.
Those phone calls told the story of who you were, a place that helps people, even to the point of tangible help in a pandemic, but beyond that as well. That's tremendous. Yeah.
Is there anybody else that wants to get in that hasn't asked a question yet? I don't want to ignore anybody or not make anybody feel a part of the discussion. Yeah, I know it's top of the hour, but so what? In the grand scheme of things, there's always time for more. Lots of shy people on the call tonight. All right,
Stacey, I certainly want to honor people's times, but
I do too.
Certainly, Myra, go ahead. But also, I mean, I'm glad I'll share these slides and my email address, and I'm glad to have more conversation with folks at another time. Myra, what?
Just thinking through, your opening statement on scarcity. I think we witness and see quite a bit of that, and it may come down to what Dimitri was saying in terms of trying to keep the lights on, in terms of trying to keep the doors open. How do we move, or what steps do we take to move away from the thinking of scarcity and to the thinking of generosity and reaching out to the community? So that what we saw, as Owen said, when, with the increases that we had in our parish, the more generous that we were, suggesting that we would help and we would deliver food, as an example. Number one, it made us feel like, yeah, we can help somebody as the community. And number two, it made people feel that, you're giving back. So how, and during the pandemic, it was in many ways, I don't want to say easy, but, reaching out and trying to help was just part of what I think a lot of people did, not just St. George and not, but a lot of people did. How do we kind of maintain that and not always go back to, let's just keep the lights on, which is important, because if the lights are not on, the people cannot come. There's no question about that. Then how do we go a little bit beyond that and move away from the notion of scarcity?
Well, and I think you actually have the seeds of your own answer right there of practicing abundance. I mean, practicing it in small and tangible steps, of helping people to see what there is. Certainly there are consultants that can help with asset thinking. There are books that can help with that. But honestly, simply to invite leaders to start thinking about what is there and what has God called us to do with this. One of my favorite questions is, with what we have, what can we do? The Bible is really full of stories of God honoring what people have and doing with what God wants done. And I think that you all have already found some of the places. I agree, pandemic made it a little more obvious sometimes, but what a powerful story to build on of success. Look, the church did this. We could keep doing something. What is the next thing that God is calling us to do? That you can do. But you've got Stacy and Father Jim, who are far expert here in your particular setting.
I want to say to Dimitri and to Myra, the necessities, right, of church life, of the lights being on every day and the facility being taken care of, in kind of telling your stewardship story of your parish. Those are sort of the givens. And I don't mean to minimize them, but what I really want to elevate are the great things that the parish does in terms of ministry, whether that's youth ministry to the community at large, the food stuffs that we all do in pantries and every other sort of way. By elevating those things in front of your congregation, you're in a very real way showing them how to be how your parish is being the hands and feet of Christ at work, again, in the community local or the community writ large. My dad was a stewardship chair in the 80s and 90s, and they talked about, the cost to keep the building open for the day, right? If you can donate X dollars, you're supporting the parish for a day. We got to move past that to the work and the ministries of the church to really inspire people to want to give of themselves and of their resources. That's all I wanted to. Right, go ahead, Dimitri.
And that is the challenge, Stacey. I agree with you, because we feel hostages to the current status, and we cannot take this leap of faith. Okay, the current status will be, let's move on, let's go to the next step, and that prevents us to tell the story. We just stay. We are prisoners to our own, to the daily thing. I don't know how else to express it. That's frustrating. Yeah, because it takes a lot of energy and effort and everything, and you cannot get out of it somehow. It's like a gravitational pull that keeps you into the current thing. It's difficult.
Yes.
It's difficult to break up, to break loose, and to take the next step. It takes faith, I think. To me, it says, come on, guys, we're a church. Christ will provide. We'll pray and we'll move on.
Stewardship is the ultimate leap of faith. It really is. And in some senses, we're all tied to the historicity of our churches. And another word for tied to is anchored. and I don't mean that in a necessarily positive way. Father Jim, go ahead, please.
Just 2 points. I want to quote a great Chicago priest to the Chicago people, Father Bill Chuganis of blessed memory. He said, people don't give to need, they give to vision. And he expanded on that. And that's really true. So I think we really need to cast vision as much as possible and let people know the golden age of our parish lies still ahead, because they're always looking back at this golden time that really never really did exist. And our budgets, they need to be inspirational. We need to add line items for things that are outside the box, philanthropic efforts or special projects or international missions, whatever it is that will inspire people to say, oh, I can give to my church, and that will help that, so I can just give to my church and not have to give all these different places. It just helps them to see the church is doing more. I mean, we need administration, and administration allows us to pray freely, to have a place to go. We need to understand that the overhead is really ministry too. That's part of it. That's a harder sell. And if we talk about where we're going and where we see our church going, and do small things in the church, physical things that show that we're keeping it up and improving and changing, so they go, oh, we're not dying, we're not just maintaining, we're not in fetal position, but we're moving forward. Whether it's a small icon project or a big icon project or some renovation. And you make fun of me because I always talk about the bathrooms, but renovate your bathrooms, because that says we're a family-friendly place. Whatever it is that you can do, show a sign that we're moving forward. So that's the end of my sermon. Sorry.
Well, that's a very fun sermon and blessing for us. Certainly, this work is beyond a quick fix, but every step helps to change that story, helps to invite people in, and there are many people who want very much to be generous, and Parish Life can help give them opportunities to see that call fulfilled, and to recognize that blessing in their own lives. So I'm so pleased to be with you this evening, and I will forward along these slides through Stacy, and that will be all to the good.
Send them
Friends,
to me,
thank
and
you
I'll
so
make
much.
sure Myra gets them and distributes them to everybody,
Wonderful.
even those who missed out on attending tonight.
Absolutely.
Meredith, thank you. Thank you for the discussion, for your wisdom. Yes, for the data, even though I'm not a data cruncher. It is important for sure, especially for all the stewardship work that everybody on this call does, knowing who their donors and their givers are and sort of the patterns is important. So thank you for all of that. Seeing no other questions or hands raised, Father Jim.
Okay, I'm going to add my thank you to Meredith too. Meredith is an incredible person. From a subject that might seem dry to the parishes, she brings such a joy to the subject of stewardship. It's really a pleasure always to hear her speak. And if you ever get a chance to participate in the Lake Institute, either the executive certificate in religious fundraising or whatever program you hear, it's definitely worth your time and effort to get involved there. Meredith is not, she's an ordained minister, but she supervises 60 parishes. How many parishes are you supervising?
Just 45.
45.
Don't give me more.
So in addition to the Lake Institute and everything else, and all that she does to inspire us with stewardship, she's a real leader in her ministry. So thank you, Meredith, for that. I'll close with a quick prayer here. Christ is risen from the dead. By his death, he has trampled upon death. To those in whom bestowing life eternal. We thank you, Lord, for this evening, this opportunity to gather together as parish leaders, to share ideas and to learn together. Thank you for the blessing of having Meredith join us this evening, for all the wisdom and information she shared with us. We ask that you let us be good stewards of that information and turn it into greater gifts to our churches for the glory of you. All these things we pray in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Meredith, thank you again. Give our regards to
Meredith.
Melissa. I miss her. Haven't talked to her in a while. So please tell her we said hello. Have a great evening, everybody. June 7th is the next gathering of this body. So mark your calendars.
All right. Christ is
Thank
risen.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
night.
Stacy.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Good
Father.
night.
Good night.
Christ is risen.